Everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to do an art journal page with lots of layers. Here is the inspiration for the page, a tulip out of my garden. It was absolutely beautiful, the purple with the blue to the center. So for that, I grabbed this Clea napkin from NinnysNapkins, and it's super large. I rough cut it out so I could play with it on my art journal sizes. That's the 9x12 and this is the 7x10, and you can see how big it is, and it's just a little too big for the 7x10, so I'm going to use my 9x12 Canson mixed media. So for my color scheme, I'm looking to the colors in the napkin, and I grab out a few colors that I think are going, and then I'm just swatching them out to see if they match. So that's dioxazine purple, Prussian blue, and quinacridone magenta. And when you mix the quinacridone magenta and Prussian blue, you get that other shade of purple that's in the flower. And then I'm using bright or brilliant yellow as well. So those are the colors that I have. I flip through my gel prints and I grab out prints that use the quinacridone magenta but also have some blue in it or purple. And when I grab my gel prints or collage papers, I try to get papers that are different weights. So some are copy paper, some are on tissue paper, deli paper, and then I even grab one that is colored coffee filter. I'm ripping them up into odd shapes and I'm going to layer them on. So really this gives me a couple layers to start off with. This is a great way to break your blank page and start your color story. And I keep pulling my napkin focal in there to see how it's working. I'm just cutting that straight edge across the top and then just going to layer these up, ripping off any of the straight edges. I don't really like the look of straight edges on there, although because we're going to be layering so many things on top of this, those straight edges really get pushed to the background. So once I have a rough idea of where I want everything, and keeping in mind I want to start layering, I'm gluing it down with my fluid matte medium from Liquitex. I just brush it underneath and brush it on top. The products here can be found in the various affiliate links below: NinnysNapkins, Amazon, and the TCW Shopify store. There are links and or coupon codes in the description box below, so if you're interested in that, go and check it out. The Amazon links will take you to your Amazon store if you're in the 5 countries listed in the description box: Canada, Spain, Italy, UK, and Germany, I believe. Maybe France instead of Spain. So I'm just gluing that all down, and then once everything is where I want it, I'm going to let this dry. You can use a heat tool. I usually do. But you want it quite dry, and there's lots of layers of moisture in there. Now, because I want to do the removing paint through the stencil technique, I need this to be gessoed, but I don't want to lose the color that's here. So I am using clear gesso from the Crafter's Workshop. This goes on cloudy, as you see here, but it dries perfectly clear, and it allows you to do the same techniques you would if that was just a gessoed surface. You want it to be non-porous. So fast forward, it's all dried now, and I'm going to be applying some Prussian blue over top of the pink, which kind of gives it that purple tone that's in the focal image. And then I'm putting this Garden Gate stencil from the Crafter's Workshop over top and using a baby wiper cloth to remove the paint through the stencil. Now the paint wasn't dark enough there, so I'm coming back and I'm just going to put a little bit more paint this time on there and remove the stencil again. Remove the paint through the stencil again. And I'm loving that look. And it looks different if it's on the pink or if it's on the white. So I'm going to do this same thing in at least one other spot. Now I chose that stencil because it mirrors the points of the flower in the napkin focal. So you want the elements that you use, the selection of your stencil, to tie in. So that's the third layer. Here is the fourth layer, and we are just going to now stencil through that same stencil. So we're going to end up with a positive, negative for the same stencil. So here the flower part is in blue and the other one it's in white, or you see the color come through. I like using the same stencil with two different colors or two different techniques. Being the same leads to that cohesive feel, but being different color paints or different techniques give it that little bit of interest. So this is the fourth layer. So sometimes it's visual layers, and every time you put something on top, you are pushing something back. You can see those collage papers that we glued down right at the beginning look a lot different now with all these layers on top. But we're not done layering yet. I think I got a little carried away with too much blue here. And so I'd grab this Leafy texture stencil. It's a 12-inch, and I'm using white. I want to introduce back some of that white. Again, the design on this stencil matches the petals of the flower, and this gives a lot of movement to the background. I love how this stencil works for that purpose. And it's putting back the white in there, which is adding a lot of interest. So this is like the fifth layer. Just love the motion of that stencil. You can see how the various components are mirroring the shape of the leaves of that flower. I've also added some stamping with my word stamp from Stamperia on there with black acrylic paint. And this is just a close-up of the background before I start adding to it. And I'm going to continue adding layers, more color layers. So I'm just going to zoom right out here. And I have this other stamp from the Sacred Geometry stamp set from Stamperia, and I'm putting white acrylic paint on it with a makeup sponge and pressing it down. So are we the fifth, sixth layer? I love, this is my favorite stamp in that set. And I find it so very usable. And page neutral. All the stamps and stencils that I've used here can be used for any themed page. I'm liking when I get brighter white. Now, when you stamp with acrylic paint, you not only get the pattern and design, but you also get a little bit of physical texture because it's thicker than just ink. So I'm just moving around and adding more. I know I'm going to put the napkin over in that corner, but I'm stamping a little bit, so maybe a little bits of this motif and pattern are going to peek through. And I'm taking care to maybe stamp some of them off the page. Using the stamp with white acrylic paint is also lightening the background a bit. It's really, this edition really made a difference, in my mind, to this page. Now I'm edging the page. I've got black acrylic paint on a sponge here. That's a Ranger blending foam. And then I'm going to shade across the top and the sides. This just frames the page and is always part of my finishing process, although I tend to do it more in the middle to frame the page before I start the actual composition. So I'm trying the napkin. I'm happy with everything and getting ready to glue the napkin down. But before I do, I need to remove the 2 excess plies. And then I am gluing this down with the fluid matte medium onto just copy paper. The reason for that is if I glued it down on the page, it would go translucent and you would see whatever's in the background come through. And I don't want that. Sometimes you do. If I glued the napkin down first and then did the background, that would be okay, but it's easier to do the whole page background and then glue this on copy paper. So now I'm looking at it and with everything together and just taking a picture. Sometimes that gives me a different perspective on how it looks. Now, right now I'm looking at it and I'm going, it's a little too much of the same. The flower is not standing out against the background. So the next steps, I'm going to be tweaking the background and the flower colors so that the flower stands out. It's the focal image. I want it to stand out. And you can do that by a combination. I do a little bit of a dance between darkening and lightening the background and the flower. You'll see what I mean. But I'm loving the look of all the elements. So I glue, here I'm just adding a wash of the pink on top. I'm getting rid of some of the white, adding a little bit of the pink. Sometimes on the brush I'm mixing the Prussian blue with the pink to get that specific shade of purple that's there, and I keep testing my focal image out on it. Sometimes you'll see me grabbing a baby wipe and wiping it back. So it's a little bit of a dance, adding, deleting different colors to get the effect that I want. So here I'm just kind of wiping back the baby wipe. So you get different variations in purity of white and variations in the blue. And sometimes when you do a wash of color on top or a wash of white, that just pushes everything back and allows that focal image to go. So I glued down my focal image with gel medium, and now I'm going to add color to it. I'm going to work on brightening the colors of the focal image so they stand out. So I've got on the side, I've got the Prussian blue, the quinacridone magenta, white gesso, and the dioxazine purple, and I'm watering it down a bit and then over-painting the napkin. I'm just bumping up the colors. And you'll see this evolve over time. This is one of my favorite ways of overpainting napkins and adding. It makes you kind of make it your own. So it doesn't look like a napkin's been glued on. It looks like you've painted the flower yourself. You see me sometimes putting it on and rubbing it with my finger just to blend it. Now remember, that's a napkin, so there is texture there, and it looks like the veins of the flower. So I'm playing that up by rubbing the paint over top. And you can see already the flower is standing out a little bit more. I painted the white parts, the highlights of the flower, with white acrylic paint. And here I'm adding a little bit more of that. Now I'm putting the white all the way around the flower. This is pushing back the background and allowing the flower to stand out. Kind of giving it a halo effect all the way around the flower. And you can work this band out thicker if you wanted to. I kind of go a little bit of a different way. This just removes any of that clutter from directly beside the flower. So the flower isn't competing with the background anymore. And right now, as I'm looking at this, the flower is what you see first. So the white halo effect, shading around it, really did work. I'm just whitening out some of the other parts just to push them further back. But I'm not doing the whole thing because I like the contrast, the variations of interest. Now I'm shading around with a little bit less of a band, a little bit more narrow than what the white was, with a combination of the Prussian blue and the quinacridone magenta. This is now giving shading. So we did the halo and now we're doing the dark. And this really makes that flower, it pushes the flower up. Then I'm adding some black shading or mixture with the black and the Prussian blue or the quinacridone magenta on top to bring out the petals. So as I said, there's lots of different steps here where you're shading and tweaking the colors. And it's a dance between adding darks and lights. And if you see me going over the same spot again, that's because I put a little bit and then I decide, do I want it darker? Go back and add once it's dry. Just lightening the parts right close to where the flower is. And then I'm grabbing that word stamp. Now I had stamped with black acrylic paint at an earlier stage, and now I want to bring some of that back, and this time I'm using white acrylic paint, and I'm putting that on with my felt, my Ranger blending foam, and then I'm stamping. This is lightening the background, pushing other things to the background, and just adding one more layer. And I'm loving how this all came together at this stage. The background is really a background. It's not competing with the flower. The flower is standing out because of the shading we did. I went through my sentiment packs and I found one in my Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack. Life Began in a Garden. I cut it out and I'm placing it there. Gluing it down with the fluid matte medium. And then giving that a dry. A lot of the drying I don't keep on camera, but I do dry in between all the layers. I'm just painting in the stem here with some green paint. And just adding that little bit of green in the center of the flower. There is some green there in the napkin. I'm just adding a little bit more and making sure it's the same shade that I've used. Now I grabbed my General's charcoal pencil, and this is the medium one, and I'm just adding a sketchy line around the flower. I smudge a little bit of this, but mostly it's just adding those lines in there, and it just adds to the finished product. Where I'm rubbing it, that's just adding more shadow. And then I'm using the same charcoal pen around the edge to give that soft shaded look. And that just ties it all in. And then I'm shading the top and the bottom of each of the sentiment strips. Taking off the tape, now I have a nice straight edge, which is why I put the tape there. And there we have it, the finished page. Look at all those layers of interest. Enjoy the close-ups. I hope you layer it up. Until next time, go get creative.